Welcome back to the New Chuan podcast. Today we are continuing our discussion of Wang Jing from another thing by Marnix Wells. This is a series of posts that he did way back on, I don't know, early 2000s probably on the internet, where he goes into Wang's Bagua and various aspects of the training and breaks down the different techniques and all this stuff. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves. In the Patreon this week, we also talk about Wang Jing more, but in this context, it's his meeting with Heng Yishang from Blurred Boundaries. So check that out. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. Take care of yourselves and be well.
Today we complete our discussion of the famous Bagua and Xingyi master Wang Jin of Taiwan. We're going to take a look at an article from one of his students, Marnix Wells, PhD, the Englishman that we talked about earlier, who's a fine internal martial arts practitioner, translator, and all-around scholar of these topics. He trained with Master Wang in the 70s and got to, really learn the system in depth from him on extended stays in Taiwan during that period, and has continued to practice and teach that method. So he says that he wrote an article, not an article, these were some postings on the old Empty Flower forum way back in the day. So I'm assuming this is probably around the early 2000s somewhere. So he begins by explaining the main components taught in Wang Shijin's Bagua. So he lists 8 different things. Now this, in his previous article, some of this was also in the previous article, but he sort of reiterates some things and adds some new things here. So I thought this would be a nice way to finish our discussion of Master Wang. So this is the order of things in the way you learn Bagua. So you start with the standing post, right? We talked a lot about that. That's, again, like we've said repeatedly, this seems to be at the core of everyone who came out of the Wang Shijin school. Standing, holding postures to develop internal qi power.
Definitely one of his hallmarks for sure.
So that's phase 1, is just juicing up your energy. Stage 2 is single movement practice. He calls Dan Lian, one move, alone and with partner, as well as stretching and strengthening exercises. So that's like drill and block kind of practice.
Yeah.
So those are, again, 2-person exercises essential to learning and doing them by yourself. So those would be maybe also consistent with the opening the energy gates warm-ups and the cloud hands, and also what Kumar calls the energy warm-ups, or what do they call them? The energy practices from Bagua, where you do piercing over and over and chopping over and over.
Yeah.
Sort of like single move warm-ups. You call it Jiben Gong. He calls it Danlian. So part 3 is circle walking with static upper body postures. So yeah, there you go. In his books, Wang Shijin demonstrates holding different postures. Pretty similar to the ones you do while you're just standing there.
Yeah. We talked about the post-heaven training versus the pre-heaven training, right? So that the more external body training, conditioning stuff first. And that's what I think he means by the single movement thing, right? Like you're just learning to do things with power, essentially, right? Whether it's internal
stationary
power, whether it's internal power, external power, that you're just solid when you do single movements, right? Then you start doing those single movements while you're walking the circle, and so it's very similar to the other ways.
Well, yeah, so the standing post, then single movements, then circle walking holding a post, and then part 4 is fixed step linking palms. 8 palm changes aim to train the 8 basic energies, postures, techniques. So now you're moving your arms while you walk. So now he uses this code of the sort of Bagua poem, Tui Tuo Dai Ling Ban Kuo Pi Jin.
Right, there's that.
Which he translates, Tui Tuo is push and lift. So Tui, like Tui show, that's where you shove, and Tuo is where you sort of a shoving lift. That's a very common Bagua technique. Then Dai Ling, as I understand, are pull. He translates as carry and lead, which I have learned as single-handed pulling and double-handed pulling. Like Liu in Tai Chi, basically, you yank them off their balance. Then Ban and Ko. So Ban is that Tian where you shift side to side, chopping side to side. That's Ban, to move. And that's a very big deal in Gao style Bagua. It sounds like it's They do it in Wang's as
I mean,
well.
these are
Side
just.
chopping, basically.
I mean,
Wham!
these are just basic techniques, right? These are his like, it's like if this was Tai Chi, you'd be saying Peng Lu Ji An, like
Right. But these are the Bagua versions. So yeah, so that's Ban Ko, and Ko he calls here to capture. That coiling inward action of
right,
Ko that we've talked about a bunch. And then the last two are Pi and Jin. Pi, chop, as in Pitran,
right.
chopping wood. And then Jin, enter. I'd I'd call it like blast or just like shock or just like enter and knock them back. Jin power. So those are the first eight palm changes. Then he says part five is the flowing dragon rambling body palm. Longsheng Yushen Zhang. So that's that. It's sometimes called swimming body. He calls it rambling body. Free movement. So that's the second set, which is fluid step, faster, continuous, and so forth. It follows the principle of one gives rise to two, two to three, three to the 10,000 things. This idea found in the Tao Te Ching, and that it goes from very simple to very complex, adding complexity in each change. So yeah, so you learn Lian Huan, then you learn
Right, yeah,
Yushen.
yeah. So we're back to that linked and then smooth,
Exactly.
right? So,
Whereas in low set and Gao style Bagua, you use the same palms, you just do them in a different manner when you switch
right,
from one level to the next. In this case, I believe it's a second set of changes.
yeah. Well, it could be. I mean, I think you'll probably do it with the same set too. I mean, it's
You could modify it to be more fluid and more
yeah.
flexible and more complex, like this flowing, rambling palm. I like rambling palm. That's kind of cool.
It sounds
Sounds like Marnix, honestly, because that's just he's got a rambling sort of feel to his lanky movements. So
I,
good
I
fit
I
there.
always use the word meandering, but yeah, it's
Meandering,
that
rambling,
feeling of like you're
free
not in.
flowing.
Yeah, that your circle is you go instead of a whirlpool, you become a river, right? Like it goes on and it wiggles and winds and twists and and it's just like, but there's no confined space to it.
Yeah, it's a good type Bagua type of term. Rambling, meandering, stumbling. I don't know. Just, you're out there doing your thing. But then when it comes time for action, your techniques are surprisingly effective. Like Bagua isn't always the cleanest. It's not always like the nice Kenpo combos or whatever. Like sometimes it's just sloppy and slappy and stumbling and
Well, most of the
tripping and
fighting stuff, yeah, I mean the what you would see sort of as traditional, you do this, I do that. That's that first stage. That's that linked palm stage, right? That's where you're learning it like any other martial art.
1, 2, 1, 2 over and over.
Then there's a second stage to it where it becomes a little more spontaneous.
One, two,
And
three, three, four,
yeah,
five. Yeah. Yeah. And he says from very simple to very complex, that sort of I Ching idea, that
right.
Tao Te Ching idea of 1, 2, 3, 10, 100, 1,000, it like grows exponentially and becomes overwhelming with possibilities.
The one becomes the many become the one,
Right. And then
right?
you're back to the basics. So
Yeah.
then part six is Bagua push hands, which is, I don't know how they do it in Master Wong's school, but it's
I
probably
think
includes
that's the
push
row
hands
show.
and Rosho.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the row show stuff.
And then seven is applications using fixed but heavy emphasis on free sparring and fighting. So that's it's not Rosho anymore. Now it's just
Right.
practicing
I remember
combative
when Marnix
sparring.
was when we did that little seminar with him. One of the things he did was sort of a walking in circles row
A
show thing.
circle walking Rosho, yeah, a little bit.
And he was the only other person besides Bruce that I ever had seen actually do that in a,
Yeah.
other people
Yeah, so
talk
arm
about it.
circling is
Yeah.
most definitely a thing in
And
that
it was,
school.
like you said, it was definitely chaotic. It was, that
He
motherfucker
doesn't mind getting
it
wild,
was
as I
all over the
said.
place. It was like, what?
Yeah, and that's kind of a Bagua thing. Some people are cleaner and more precise than others, but there's some about the momentum and those swirling movements that even if you're, say, clumsy and lanky, shit, it's like a club swinging at a weird ass angle with increasing velocity. It doesn't have to be pretty. It's just there's something about that spinning, that centrifugal
Yeah.
force where it just can suck you right off your feet, even if it's not the smoothest, sweetest looking
Well,
martial
and
art.
I think there's also a piece of it where when you start doing all that stuff, moving in a circle, it just is kind of sloppy. I mean, that's sort of
You're,
it's. I mean, it's not sloppy. It's chaotic, right?
yeah,
It's
I mean, you're
not
off balance. You're off balance every from the first step on. You're off balance.
right. Well, most of the time things are sort of one person moves. There's that sort of back and forth. And or they circle each other kind of thing. But yeah, there's a certain point where this gets just kind of like, whoa, where there's just kind of this like blender effect to it, and it's like you either get chopped up into little bits or you come out the other side.
Absolutely. So the final piece is weapons, double sword and staff. And Marnix is always
Right,
very proud of the double sword form that Master Wang was kind of famous for.
right. That was his signature weapons form, I
Yeah,
think.
pretty much. And most Bagua schools have a staff form in there somewhere. I think the Chen Pan Ling one is pretty similar to the Wang Shijin one
Yeah, it's probably
because
the
I
same
was able
form.
to learn that from Chen Yinqing, which is pretty cool. So those are the eight different pieces of Bagua training in this school. So here's what Marnix has to say. Let me begin by saying that my impression of Master Wang's teaching is that he was very direct and taught by application and fighting.
Uh,
So yeah, if you asked him about a technique, he wouldn't like demonstrate the movement. He'd beat you with it.
right.
So, that he's not uncommon in that, but
He was a
his primary mode of teaching was application and fighting.
you feel it first, you do it second.
Now, I think there was plenty of training. You would do the standing and circling and stuff, but his method of teaching, if you
Right.
wanted to learn something, then you had to get beaten in order to learn it. And that's what it's all
Yeah.
about. So he says forms, for instance, were merely a way of developing certain powers, fluidity, and chi in preparation for fighting. Wang Shujin used very few techniques when fighting, and those he used were direct and extremely powerful. He was also left-handed, which surprised many of his opponents, as left-handedness is most often corrected in China in youth, as it is considered outside the norm.
Hmm.
Even if many fighters develop both sides in their practice, most have a strong side and a weak side, the strong side being the right. Wang's most powerful side was his left. So I hadn't heard that one before. He's a left-hander.
Mm, softball.
Yeah, and unusual in China at those old-fashioned times, when he was born. It
Right.
was certainly not a free-thinking
They
era.
they beat it out of you.
Right. Normality wasn't just encouraged, it was
Mm,
required. But yeah, so he could come out with a surprise left-handed shot. And again, his forms and stuff were only useful for developing certain power and preparation for fighting.
well, I mean, that's kind of that's a Bagua theme in a sense that the forms are just the structure to learn the principles, right? That the principles are really what you're going to use in combat. And that's
And
what
those
that,
come to life in the combat.
yeah, well, and that's what that Yushin level is about, right? That's the free form, okay, you know how to do it now, do it. And, and once you can sort of I don't know, there's a certain level of confidence in your movements. You can change. It's not really changing the movements as much as just kind of like riffing on it, kind of, and
Totally.
so uh, give it a little different spin. And I mean, I think basically that's how different styles develop in a sense, right? That, you know, the teacher, the grand teacher teaches it a certain way. His students each develop their own particular, way of doing it, and then a couple generations later, that has its own style. But really, what you're looking at is just how different people do, certain movements or what they like to do or their particular body type, applied to a certain movement or whatever.
Totally. So he says his forms reflected his philosophy of simplicity and basics, and are, compared to other Bagua forms, very simple and sometimes bland in external appearance. They are, however, very practical and powerful. Students were taught by asking how to fight or defend themselves against such and such an attack, and by fighting other schools of martial arts in free fighting tournaments. Wang encouraged exploration of the basic principles of fighting and was not a big proponent of fixed two-person sets. That sounds familiar. Yeah, so it's they weren't very pretty forms. And I think I agree looking at they're pretty simple.
Yeah.
Pretty clunky, just one, two, three, boom, move, you know.
I mean, I've always sort of said that I think, Bruce's approach was uh sort of like 40% Wang Shujing, 40% Hung Yishang, and 20% Liu Hongjae, right?
Right.
It
Maybe
was
50% Wang Jin,
well,
40%, 10%.
Wang Shujing was the warm-ups and the emphasis on
The chi,
a
the simplicity,
simplistic
yeah.
approach to doing things.
Boiling
And
it
then
down, yeah.
Hung Yisheng was the application of technique to fighting, right? And then Liu Hongjae was the meditation and sort of higher levels of it part. But
The hardcore chi
yeah, um,
obsession with the, you know, Taoist connection,
more
yeah.
the trigram stuff, if you want to
Right.
simplify it in a sense.
Yeah, so there's sort of a bland appearance in comparison to more fancier forms. And then I like how you're taught to defend yourself against such and such attack, or by fighting other schools of martial arts in free fighting tournaments,
Right.
which is always a nice place to explore your art and essential. And not a big proponent of fixed two-person sets. I mean, personally, I liked fixed two-person sets, but I could see coming from his background of growing up during the Warlord period, maybe fixed two-person sets don't make as much sense to someone like that. You know, they might think of that as a complete waste of time if you have to fight for your life. But luckily,
Well, yeah, I don't know. I
I've
mean,
never had that problem.
as you
So,
know, I'm not a big
no, you're not a
fixed
big
two
proponent,
person,
are
but
you?
see, I don't know if I'm that way because I inherited it from through Bruce from Wang Shujing.
Right.
So,
Their prejudice fell down to you.
but I think the argument in favor of two-person things is it gives you a chance to really develop like the techniques in a very like safe way or comfortable
It
way.
doesn't ignite your nervous system the
Right.
same way a freestyle thing does.
And so you learn how to do things sort of smoothly and gently and sort of with that. You get rid of that like jumpy, flinchy thing, basically.
Right.
And
Because you're not going to really get hurt. This is
right,
you're doing it with someone who, if you learn it with someone, that means you're friends because you've had to do this for hours together
exactly. Right, right,
cooperatively. So
right,
like
right.
this is someone who's
The
not going to challenge you.
downside of it is you get a little bit conditioned to doing it with someone who's cooperating. And if that's, if you don't do that other part of it,
Right.
then
It's only half. The other half is free fighting.
well, yeah, I mean the classic one is basically, if you're always used to defending first, that's gonna kind of be your like started, your habit
Yeah. Yeah.
in a
You get
sense,
used to it, no doubt.
and you need to be a little more like flexible with fighting, where you're not just, oh, I'm gonna wait for the other guy or I'm
Yeah.
gonna attack first. You need to know
Yeah.
when to do what, and so, again, like I said, both of them have an advantage, have a purpose for them for sure. But yeah, Wong was, I think, more on do the applications for the techniques and do the sort of sticky hand stuff, right? Rather than, um, a set like an Anshin Pao or, some sort of Bagua two-person
Right.
set, right?
So now he gets on to a little bit about the Xingyi side of it and why that influenced the simplicity. So he says Wang taught all three internal martial arts to students, beginning with Taiji, then Xingyi, and finally Bagua. In this sense, he followed Dong Aichuan's method of teaching Bagua only to those who already had martial arts skills, and also his own teacher's progression from Xingyi to Bagua. Speaking of Zhang Dong, he says Wang's Bagua application certainly had a Xingyi flavor to it. It was direct and without superfluous movements. This was not only a result of his training, but also his physical size, which made direct techniques and applications more natural to him than more twisting, coiling, evasive, etc. And yeah, some people who do Bagua, they'll do a Pichuan as much as they'll do a single palm change or
Right.
a Bung Chuan. So there's definitely the two mixed together really well.
Well, and he also had that E-Trend influence. So there's I mean,
high Xingyi percentage.
right. Well, each one is a simplified Xing or condensed Xingyi sort of thing. So, you know, some people are just a fan of that approach of like rather than seeing how big they can make the thing, they're like, okay, how can much can I
Right.
condense into
Just
this
condense
one
and
system,
condense. Yeah.
and which I think for the purposes of learning, sometimes it's easier if you have fewer movements to learn, it just gives you more time to focus on the internal, because again, if you're
Right.
like
Principles.
Wong,
Yeah.
you
If you're
want to
principle
focus on
obsessed.
internal principles. It's like, well, you don't need a bunch of movements to do that. You only need a few. And same goes for fighting, right? Like Bruce always said that Wang Jing's one of his favorite phrases about fighting is, the better to do one thing well than 1,000 things poorly, right? Like, it's
Yep.
better to have one technique that you can really use and, knock a motherfucker out in three beats rather than
Right.
have to do a whole bunch of stuff to like dance around with somebody and,
Right.
all that stuff. So it's kind of a
Right. And that Xingyi side of things definitely is influenced, this
that
method.
was definitely the thing that Bruce got from Wong that he emphasized with us was like this idea of, you shouldn't have to, if you have to hit somebody more than three times, you did something horribly, horribly wrong.
This is a bad
Right? Like,
matchup.
that it should never take you more than three beats to deal with one person. And that was definitely, Wong's thing of just
Sounds like Master Wong.
you just bowl right through 'em.
Well, and I always remember his quote from Bagua Journal saying, I want all my students to be able to knock someone out with one punch using Xingyi before they
Right.
start Bagua.
That is the idea.
And that is the requirement.
Yeah.
And there's no, that's that. If you, and again, this is Zhang Dong's idea. This
Right.
is Wang Shujin's idea. This is Xingyi to Bagua, which
Well, and
a lot of
that's
the best
also
Bagua guys came from Xingyi.
right. I was just gonna say, Zhang Dong was of that generation, like Li Yi, where they were,
They went to visit
equally
Master Dong. They
right. I
went.
mean, it's like Li Yi goes down in the history books as a Xingyi guy, but he learned Bagua from Chen Jinghua,
And then he
so
went to Dong's
and then he
house,
went
like
to
to
Dong,
learn
and
from
it's like
straight to his
that's as
face.
much of
So,
a Bagua guy as anybody else. But
so okay, so now we go into um, what the teaching of Bagua was like under Master Wong. So he says, I won't go into the Xing Yi and Tai Chi here, but rather concentrate on Bagua and the basics as taught by Wang. Please keep in mind, though, that Taiji and Xingyi were taught first before Bagua, and thus may be considered kind of a basis for Wang's Bagua teaching, or at least a foundation all students who studied his Bagua had. So all of them had the Taiji and Xingyi first. And that reminds me of that interview we read from Bagua Journal at the beginning of this
mhm.
Wang Shijin series, where he was saying, yeah, all we knew was Tai Chi, and we entered the karate tournament and started kicking their ass. And they had to make pushing illegal in order for the tournament to continue.
Yeah, and a
So that
lot
was
of his
funny.
students would, I mean, in a sense, a lot of times you would go to his one of his students to learn the Tai Chi part of it or something like, you by the time you got to training with Wong, you had at least a rudimentary
Right. The
basis
senior
and
students had given you a
yeah, so you weren't just going in like, how do I move my hands? So that part of it, I think, is what Marnix is saying is that like, by the time you got to
right.
doing Bagua, there was an assumption that you at least had
You already knew some shit.
most of the knowledge of how to use your body and all that stuff first,
Cool.
because, that just makes it a lot easier. And,
So he says Wang's Bagua system starts students from stillness in Zhangzhuang postures, first double weighted and later 60-40 weighted. These are aimed at building root, relaxation, calm, and qi. So again, like how many times every article we read, it's just like rooting,
you go through
calmness,
the Tai
qi.
Chi, then you have to stand a shit ton in Xingyi,
So
and
yeah,
then you get all the way to the Xingyi, and you get to the Bagua, and you're back to fucking
so
standing
we're gonna start by
again.
standing and holding postures for Bagua. Like, ah!
Oh God, this is torture.
So he says the second component, and one of the most important ones in terms of power and martial application, I think, is the practice of the single movements. These consist of palm, fist, and leg exercise aimed at developing Gong Li, or power. They are practiced first standing in 60-40 posture and then moving steps on a straight line. For example, left piercing palm, Zhang will be practiced 60 repetitions on the left and 60 repetitions on the right. There is an assortment of these exercises, such as piercing, slapping, shaking, the 5 elements of Xing Yi, and so forth. Especially in the beginning, I used to feel my arms were about to fall off, and my legs were like cooked spaghetti, not al dente. So, so those are the
Not al
one-step
dente.
exercises. Yeah, I mean, you're just rubbery from just thousands of reps. These exercises also build coordination and unity of the upper and lower body. So that's the beginning here. So yeah, you do the
Well,
piercing, the slapping, the shaking, the 5 elements, just in lines over and over. So he says we call it Ju Gong Gui Yi, which means 9 palaces return to 1 point, meaning the body acts as one unit and all power is concentrated in any given technique point. The mental aspect of this training is very important. Wang delivered tremendously painful and dangerous strikes. So Jugong Gui Yi, Ju meaning 9, Gong meaning palaces. Like up in Wudong, it was always the name of
right, right,
everything was
right.
Shi Yi Guan or Gong or
Their
whatever, like
palace, his
palace.
palace, that.
Then Gui returning to the one, as in Gui Yuan Ne
Yeah,
Gong,
yeah, yeah.
and then Yi, one or a singularity. So that's an interesting phrase. Um,
Well, I mean, that's essentially the many to become the one become the many, right? So,
And so, yeah, the nine become the one. Yeah. And the 9 curved pearl that we talked about in Tai Chi is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
also a similar concept. As it says, Jiu Gong Gui Yi is an important part of Wang's practice, and all the single movements are aimed at developing that kind of coordinated, unified power for application. There's also single movements for kicking, mainly low, outer, and inner kicks, the most common being at the end of Wang's single palm change, combined with the first bicep. Again, Wang's physique did not encourage anything higher, but kicking knees and shins is the most effective anyways, and it doesn't affect your balance or defense either. What is important to remember with the single movements is that they are not used in isolation, but rather combined in numerous ways. Thus, the basics are extremely simple and straightforward, and also very thoroughly built into the practitioner. The real challenge is combining them creatively and effectively in practice. Nevertheless, the foundation for that level is established at the beginning through the Zhang Zhuang and Dan Lian practice. So yeah, you got to combine them all, and that's where the fun and creativity comes into it. Who says, which brings us to the circle walking. Again, Wang emphasized a natural gait rather than toe first, like most practitioners do.
Interesting.
We practice the circle walking in a circle in an 8 crossing through the middle of the circle through the 9 palaces of the low shoe. The 8 is important in terms of application as it allows for extremely fast deflection and circling to the outside of the opponent. Wang's circle walking is done from heel to toe, with the inner foot's toes at an angle inward and the outer foot toes also slightly inward. So the inner step is doing a baibu and the outer toes are doing a slight kobu.
Right. So it's that
It,
really tight,
right. And so your inner foot,
great
instead of
tank.
going straight, which is the normal instruction, they turn it inward with each step.
Yeah.
It's a very natural, relaxed gait, and in my opinion, the most useful and sparring. I feel that the more natural it is, the more likely you are to use it in practice. We practice walking at a middle level most of the time, although when practicing the rambling body palm, it is often done with high mobile posture in order to allow lightning fast changes and movement. So that's interesting. So they take a really tight circle. Yeah, like you said, it sounds like an 8-step circle, pretty much, heel to toe. So they're using the heel first step, which is different from the mud step, treading step that most people use. So then he ends by talking about the linking palm here. The linking form, as I mentioned earlier, is designed to develop certain energies. The single palm change contains in itself 4 of them, Tui, Tuo, Dai, Ling, and is therefore, as we know, the basis for all the other Bagua applications. But the value of the single palm change goes beyond all that. It helps develop 2 important Bagua fighting principles, evasion and palm change, meaning in relation to the opponent's attack. That is, getting either inside or outside an opponent's door by quickly switching palms. Wang's single palm change is extremely practical and therefore is less coiling than some other styles. It basically uses 3 stages. 1, covering, ko, which can be seen in the crouching tiger posture. Two, the beginning of the palm change, which consists of forward movement and tui and tuo. And three, the actual changing of the palm. This change can be more properly seen in the rambling body palm. In the linking palms, it is more difficult and to see in the static form. Okay, so unpacking that a little bit, it sounds like the single palm covers most of the Bagua slogans there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it starts with that, quo covering, over covering effect. Then you step forward and coil to do your tui and tuo, lifting. Your tuo is lifting up and chopping down to the middle while you exchange the palms. So he says it can be seen more properly in the rambling body. In the linking palms, it's more static and difficult to see. So I guess, I don't know, maybe when you're flowing, it's more clear what that evasion and palm changing. But yeah, that single palm change once again is at the core of it. I think is sort of what he's getting at here.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, it's just that I think what he's saying is that in the more staccato single movement version of it, you don't see the the what if you will the connection between the movements as much
Hmm.
as when you start to do them in that smooth way. You start to see how they're sort of a continue. I mean, that's usually why it's called continuous, is it's all one thing, right? It's like the whole set is one continuous move. You're not just doing one thing and then another thing and another thing. It's
Yeah, I agree. That's my impression of it. Yeah, good stuff. It was an interesting breakdown of that nine palace return to the one kind of concept and
I
that
always enjoy it.
simplifying and condensing of Wang Shujin's system. But yeah, interesting insights into the training and daily workout of
Yeah,
that system.
I always like Marnix's breakdown of things. It's just very to the
Yeah.
you
Yeah, he's a good way of explaining stuff.
Well,
Looking forward to what comes next.
me too. All right, man. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Hey, folks, hope you enjoyed the episode. You can head over to the Patreon, join for $5 a month, gets you the membership where you can hear the bonus episode that comes out with each regular episode, as well as our entire archive. All right, thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.